Lightning has struck me all my life. Just once was it real. How is that for a start? Does it sound like the beginning of something spectacular? And if yes, why? What is it about us humans that attracts us toward unusual events, toward rarities and one-offs? Is it our innate drive for curiosity, or are we simply cowards, afraid to to live life the way we want to, and craving to experience it through others vicariously? The line I've just read is the beginning of Remarkable Creatures by Tracy Chevalier. Being historical, the novel features real people, people who lived, loved, and died, people who followed their dreams, and people who merely existed. As you can guess, the character who utters this line belongs to the first group. Her name is Mary Anning. She is a lightning survivor and a fossil hunter, a paleontologist before the term even existed, in the early 1800s in the town of Lyme Regis, England. She's impossibly curious. She's driven by her passion to find fossils. She does that all the time, every day, no matter what. She even says, I don't remember there ever being a time when I weren't out upon beach. I was always looking for curies. Curies is what people back then called fossils because they were curious objects. They had no idea what they were. They assumed that they were the remains of snakes or some other creatures that were still living. But obviously, we are talking about some extinct creatures here, some dinosaurs and others. Mary Anning is young when the novel begins. She's only 9 years old. And despite that, she has already learned quite a bit about fossil hunting from her father, but also from experience, because she's there every day. And this is all she thinks about. She has found her passion early on, and she's not afraid to pursue it. She doesn't care about other people. She's a strong woman, even though she's only 9. In this regard, she's much more mature than some people who are in the 80s. She has a brother, Joseph, who is the exact opposite of her. Even though he also has the eye to find fossils, he doesn't want to. He does find quite a few things. Actually, he finds more in terms of quantity than Mary, but she finds the unusual pieces, all except one. And about that one, we'll talk a little bit later. The parents of Mary and Joseph are called Molly and Richard Anning. Richard is a cabinet maker and a fossil hunter. The cabinets just pay a little bit of the bills, and his passion is fossil hunting. He likes nature. And he's forever dreaming of the monster that will pay off their debts because they are in debt. He's not particularly good at his cabinet making. And he's too in love with fossils to let them go. So he's stuck between two chairs. He does what he can to keep living, not just merely existing. Molly, on the other hand, his wife, is a down-to-earth woman. She has no ambition. She just wants to have food on the table. She wants stability. She wants to be warm, fed, and so on. And she's, in this regard, she's like Joseph. In other words, we have two adventurers and two conventional people in this family. And this is one of the main themes, main questions that the novel asks. Which one is better? Or is one better? Does it always depend on circumstances, or does it depend on something else? And it's very difficult to answer this question because strong cases can be made that both Mary's and Joseph's choices are legitimate. Why, you ask? Well, the Annings had 10 children in total, but only Mary and Joseph made it to the adulthood. All other 8 died. So now they are left with 2. And this is unimaginable pain. Child mortality 200 years ago was horrible. It was so high that we cannot even think about it. We cannot contemplate it. We cannot begin to process this, let alone try to put ourselves in those people's shoes and make a decision as though we were them. And yet, those people had to live somehow. They had to figure out what is the way to go. And nowadays, we still face this problem. Should we become artists, hoping that one day we'll be the next Picasso or the next Madonna? Or should we pursue a normal career, get a 9 to 5 job, secure salary, and be miserable? Miserable, but secure. We can have a stable life, a stable income. Or we can have a remarkable life if things work out. Because we tend to judge things based on successful examples, the so-called confirmation bias. We see that we have, for example, Cristiano Ronaldo and Messi who make tremendous amount of money and that they can do whatever they want. But we forget that there are millions of other people who have tried to become soccer players and they have failed. So this is a team that transcends time. And for the time being, there's no clear solution, which is better. On the one hand, I think that we should try to find our passion. We should try to pursue it as well as we can, as best as we can. We should be a little bit more than Mary Anning. But we should also be realistic. We should be persistent. We should be consistent, and we should try to make it happen. We should be like Mary, really. When we find what we love, we should follow it. She's so into fossils that she ignores weather, hunger, and even illness. She says, "How can you care about cold when these creatures are out there just waiting for us to find them?" And this comes from a 9-year-old. She repeats this statement throughout the novel, so it comes from her in general. This is how she functions, how she works. The theme of coldness is recurrent through the pages, and the result is always the same. If there's a creature out there, Mary is trying to find it. In the town of Lyme Regis, there's only one fossil hunter, but he's not in the same level. His name is Captain Curie. Well, William Locke, but everybody calls him Captain Curie. And he's an obnoxious individual. He's a narcissist. He's arrogant. He tries to find fossils, but he doesn't have the scientific interest. He doesn't have this scientific curiosity to figure out what he has found. He sees only money. He sees bills. He sees coins whenever he finds a fossil, and he just sells them. And he has no qualms whatsoever to steal other people's fossils, including some of Mary's and Joseph's. They at one point, the two of them start digging one fossil, and they go home because it gets too late. And then on the next day, they see Captain Curie finishing the dig. And he says, "Well, now I'm finishing. I'm digging it up. It's my fossil. It's not yours. So get out of here." This is the kind of person Captain Curie is. And pretty much nobody else in Lyme Regis cares about fossils. They care about other things, like the weather, like the tides, but not about the creatures that have lived long, long ago. They even don't think that those creatures are extinct, because this concept is not in line with the general understanding of the world back then. The Bible in the early 1800s was to be interpreted literally, which meant that God created the earth in 6 days. He put some animals on it, and those animals remained without change, without additions, without evolution, without extinction. And people believe that, even geologists who were the scientists in charge of fossils back then, because, as I've mentioned, paleontology was not yet a field. And if this sounds outrageous today, we should probably be not that just judgmental, because we have seen it time and again that things that appear obvious at one point in history might appear ridiculous a couple of centuries later, even a couple of decades. This is how we progress. We go from one point to the next, to the next, to the next. Sometimes we go backward, but the tendency, for the most part, has been forward. And that's a good thing. Before long, Mary gets a companion. Her name is Elizabeth Philpot. And she is the eldest of 5 siblings. Does this ring a bell? It should, because there's another Elizabeth who lived in England, at least in fiction England, and who was created by another author in a different time. I mean Elizabeth Bennet from Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. There we have 5 sisters, and the book itself is a satire showing how ridiculous society was back then, where women were supposed to be baby factories. They were supposed to get some education, that is, they had to learn how to sing, how to play the piano, they had to learn some foreign languages, maybe, how to behave, and they had to be chameleons, changing their colors depending on their husband's needs. And the main or the biggest achievement a woman could ask for in life was to marry well. This is why the mother of the 5 Bennets is obsessed with finding husbands for her 5 daughters. She is looking for potential suitors, and the only thing she cares about is how much they make, their income. And this is crazy. This sounds really crazy to modern ears, but this was the case back then because women were not supposed to work, and thus they automatically became dependent on their husbands or their parents if they failed to marry, if they became spinsters. Jane Austen really wants to focus on the inner world of women, and that's why she ignores global politics. She ignores the Napoleonic War. She ignores the fact that maybe 10% of the population routinely dies of smallpox, and that it is full of people with scars due to this horrible disease and many others, that people starve to death on the street. She ignores all that so that the reader can focus on what's going on through the mind of a middle-class woman. Otherwise, would we even register Elizabeth's 3-mile walk in the rain as a problem? I don't think so. As an author, you have to choose what to include and what to omit, and both are equally important. In my view, Jane Austen has chosen well. And this illusion is not by chance. Well, in a way, it is, because Remarkable Creatures is a historical novel, and the Philpots were indeed 5 siblings, so be it 4 daughters and one brother instead of just 5 4 daughters and 1 son instead of just 5 daughters. But still, the illusion is there, and for those who miss it later on, the Tracy Chevalier refers to Jane Austen explicitly. And Chevalier is also a feminist author. She wants to depict the plight of women, and she does so magnificently. She shows how difficult it was for them in the past. And in doing so, she makes us think, okay, are things really much better? Have we fixed this? Is there anything else we could do or should do? Have we gone too far? Or maybe not far enough? It makes us think, which is key. And Chevalier picks up where Jane Austen has left off. Another interesting thing about Jane Austen is that because she was a woman, she couldn't publish her books in her name at first. This is a recurrent theme here in Remarkable Creatures as well, because Mary Anning is by far the most successful fossil hunter in the entire novel. And in real life, she was as well. And it is not she who publishes scientific articles on her finds. It is not she who gets to name the creatures she finds. It is men, members of the Geological Society, an institution that doesn't allow women to enter, not even to attend their meetings, let alone to publish articles. Women are thus completely left off the realms of science and discovery. They're just tools, not worth mentioning, like hammers and chisels in the eyes of men, at least in the world of Remarkable Creatures. And in reality, it was not that different, because the real Mary Anning published only one article, and she did find several species of animals. Nowadays, there's a statue of her in Lyme Regis, and I believe that there's a museum dedicated to her as well. So I would like to visit that place in the future and pay tribute to her and to her work. But let's go back to Elizabeth. So the Philpots are, as I've mentioned, 4 sisters and 1 brother. And they're a middle-class family living in London. The parents are well off. The father is a solicitor, but the parents die. And thus, the brother, John, becomes kind of a shepherd to his 4 sisters. One of the sisters manages to marry, but they have, her name is Frances, but they have money only for 1 dowry, which is another one of those ridiculous traditions that we had in the past. That is, you had to literally pay somebody to take your daughter. And now we have Elizabeth, Louise, and Margaret. Margaret is the most feminine of the 3. She likes to socialize. She likes being the center of attention. And she likes reading love novels, in particular, those written by Jane Austen. Louise is very tall, very silent, and she's great at judging people in the sense that she knows what people want and what motivates them, what incentives she should provide. She's not what men would describe as a proper woman back then. The same goes for Elizabeth, who is not tall, but she has a very pronounced chin. She's also very bookish, super serious. She cannot crack a joke even if she wanted to. And she has one superpower. She can immediately spot the dominant feature of somebody's face, or not somebody's face, but of somebody's body or behavior, of somebody's mannerism. And she says that person leads with something. For example, Mary Anning leads with her eyes. Elizabeth herself leads with her chin. Louise leads with her eyes. Their brother John leads with his brow, and so on and so forth. Some people lead with body parts such as feet, hands, mouths. Others lead with clothes. And there are yet others who don't lead at all. For example, Mary's brother Joseph. He is super unassertive. Elizabeth believes that leading with your eyes is the acme of self-confidence. This is what she wants to achieve. This is her quest in the novel. She starts off leading with her chin, and her goal is to start leading with her eyes, which means that she wants to be self-confident, to be independent, to be able to express herself freely, to not depend on others, in particular on men, to achieve what she wants, or to have somebody to corroborate her theory. She wants to be assertive. She wants to be independent. And now we have the 3 sisters, and there's no money for them to stay in London. The brother John marries one of the daughters of a colleague of his father's, and he also sells the family home and moves into another place that's close to the British Museum. And Elizabeth, Louise, and Margaret have to find a new place, and they opt for, being gently nudged by John, they opt for Lyme Regis. At first, they're not particularly impressed because this is not London. In London, they talk about the global world, the big world. They talk about other nations. They socialize with people who are interested in poetry and so on and so forth. And in Lyme Regis, this is not possible. When they move, Elizabeth says the following: "The physical reduction of space and furnishings mirrored our own condition, from a substantial family with several servants and plenty of visitors, to a reduced household with 1 servant to cook and clean, in a town with many fewer families whom we could socialize with." There's a big difference, obviously. There are no talks about Napoleon. There are no talks about the French Revolution. No talks about Shakespeare. But there's something else. And her attitude changes toward the novel. Toward the end, she's about 20 years older, and she goes to London and she says, well, whatever you say about people in Lyme, they're not Tao. And she means that she realizes that the Londoners are quite ridiculous in certain aspects, that they're supercilious, that they take themselves too seriously, that being member of the middle class is not really the best you can be, that it's not something to brag about. Although she still thinks that she still thinks in classes. She doesn't go full meritocratic toward the end of the novel because, well, this is who she is. It's very difficult to change your worldview entirely, especially if you have spent the first 25 years of your life living a certain way. And this is what she does. She's 25 when she moves to Lyme Regis, and her youngest sister, Margaret, is 18. Soon, the three of them grow to like Lyme Regis, however. For Margaret, this is a chance to be the most popular woman around, because in London she had a lot of competition, and in Lyme Regis suddenly she has virtually none. She's 18, she's super desirable, and before long, a certain James Foote appears into the picture, and he starts wooing her. However, he's a conventional man. He's a product of that society that Tracy Chevalier is trying to ridicule. He expects women to behave the proper way, whatever that means. But it's actually important what that means. So women were supposed to be kept at home. They were not supposed to have any hobbies that were not high class or highbrow or whatever. They were not certainly not supposed to collect fossils, because this is a dirty job. It gets you dirty. You go out in the rain. You go out in the mud, and you cannot do that in fancy dresses or wearing fancy gloves. It just doesn't work. Margaret is not one to want to find fossils, however, even though the real Margaret and the real Louis both contributed quite a bit to Elizabeth's fossil collection later on, but in the novel, they don't like it. And I think that when you write a historical novel, you don't have to be 100% true to reality, because then you would write a history book. And this is not what we want from this one. We want something that nudges us towards certain ways of thinking, right? Because we want the experience, and changing certain characteristics or features of people a little bit is all right. Shakespeare did it all the time. If you read his history plays for the sake of history, you'll be left with a very distorted idea of what happened. Much more distorted than in Tracy Chevalier's case, at least in some respects, actually. But let's stick with Tracy Chevalier for now. So Margaret finds this James Foote, or the other way around, and now people start thinking about marriage. But there's a problem. The three sisters don't have much money. They have £150 per year, which was a good sum for Lyme Regis, for 3 women and 1 servant to live without having to work. But this is not something that qualifies as a good dowry or anything. So James Foote starts investigating deeper. This is what Louis and Elizabeth say when they discuss the prospect of marriage. A man chooses a wife by taking an intricate measure of her and her family. If there's no money, then the character of the family he marries into becomes important. And what is the character of that family? We have 2 bookish sisters, 2 very serious women. One of them, Louise, is great at understanding others and great at solving problems that usually men want to solve in order to prove their superiority. And Elizabeth is a fossil hunter. This is something that is considered decidedly unladylike. This is what she says. Few women took an interest in fossils. It was seen as an unladylike pursuit, dirty and mysterious, I didn't mind. There was no one I wanted to impress with my femininity. But then again, James Foote has to be impressed. Not only that, but Louis and Elizabeth are supposed to flirt with him, to be congenial. Sisters are expected to engage in sparkling conversations with their sister's suitor to assume a slight intimacy that anticipates a familial link. And the two of them couldn't do that even if they tried. They are not used to doing this because, as Elizabeth mentions on numerous occasions, they're not attractive. And men don't ask them to dance with them. They simply not as feminine as Margaret in a way, and what they have to offer is much more valuable. It's not just looks, which are ephemeral. They have brains. They're very smart, each in their in her field. Elizabeth chooses fossils, and Louis chooses botany, and they both become very, very, very knowledgeable, especially by the end of the novel. Anyhow, James Foote soon changes his mind and decides not to marry Margaret, and Margaret is devastated. And she becomes a spinster, like her two sisters. Of the three, Elizabeth is the one whose thoughts we follow. Actually, there are 10 chapters in the book, 5 of them. The old ones are narrated by Mary Anning, and the other 5, the even ones, are narrated by Elizabeth. And Elizabeth uses the words spinster and spinsterhood throughout. She never forgets. She never stops wanting to get married. But she never succeeds either. And this is something relatable today as well, because many people, not just women, also fail to find a partner or a suitable partner. Even though today we don't have these ridiculous expectations how certain people are supposed to behave, you also don't have this class distinction, at least not to that extent. But still, maybe now we are faced with the other problem of having so many potential choices that we decide not to choose anything. Also, this brings up another question. What is the right way to find a partner? And what is the right partner? In Remarkable Creatures, we see people who actually like each other, and we also see people who settle for each other. And what's the right thing to do? Does everybody really have that big of a choice? Again, we have this adventure versus stability problem. Of course, we all want to be happy. We all want to get the best for us, the best that life has to offer. But how do we do it? What does it even mean to be the best? If you're happy, if you're in love, isn't this enough? We have all these opposites throughout the novel, all these antitheses. We have Elizabeth and Mary Anning, for example. They become friends quite early on. Elizabeth moves to Lyme Regis, as I've said, and she decides to find a passion. This is what she says, actually. I grew certain that fossils were to be my passion, for I had to find a passion. I was 25 years old, unlikely ever to marry, and in need of a hobby to fill up my days. It's so tedious being a lady sometimes. And before long, she finds enough fossils to be in need of a cabinet to store them, and she goes to Richard Anning, who is a cabinet maker. He, however, is a man of his time. He looks at a single woman, a woman that is unaccompanied by a man, who is in her mid-20s, and he automatically assumes that she is a spinster, and therefore to be taken advantage of. And he asks for an exorbitant sum for the cabinet. Elizabeth, however, decides to confront him and doesn't pay the price. She just goes home. But while in Richard Anning's workshop, she gets to meet Mary Anning, and the two of them will soon become friends, and rightfully so, because they're different. They're unlike anybody else. They love fossils, and they become each other's foils, actually, and they're very, very different in several aspects. Elizabeth is bookish. What she knows from books, whereas Mary Anning is naturally gifted. She's naturally curious, and her knowledge comes from experience. Sure, her father has taught her quite a bit, but nevertheless, she has spent thousands of hours out on the beach looking for fossils, and she can recognize them easily. She can find them. She thinks about fossils all the time, every day, no matter what. Both types of learning are valuable in a different way, and I think that the symbiosis of the two is what we should strive for, and this is what both Elizabeth and Mary end up doing. Elizabeth teaches Mary about science. About she gives her some books. She shows her some books. She teaches her how to label the specimens she finds, even though at first Mary doesn't know how to read or write. But Elizabeth convinces her to go to Sunday school, and she learns that. And Elizabeth explains that when you find something, you should write down where you found it, where you found it, when, what type of rocks were there around the specimen, and what you think it is, preferably with its Latin name. Mary, on the other hand, teaches Elizabeth how to actually find the fossils, how to use a hammer to dig them out, how to clean them. In other words, how to be a hunter. And this is another one of the main antitheses in the book. So we have hunters versus collectors. And Elizabeth provides some clear-cut definitions. Let me read them. Collectors have a list of items to be obtained, a cabinet of curiosities to be filled by others' work. Whereas hunters spend hour after hour, day after day, out in all weather, our faces sunburned, our hair tangled by the wind, our eyes in a permanent squint, our nails ragged, and our fingertips torn, our hands chapped. Our boots are trimmed with mud and stained with seawater. Our clothes are filthy by the end of the day. Often we find nothing, but we are patient and hardworking. There's also a third category, that is the dealers. However, in life, nothing is black or white. Everything is a little bit fluid. And look at Elizabeth. She's not just a hunter. Sure, she hunts fossils. She does this because she's passionate about finding them, especially fossils of fish, because fish lead with their eyes, and this is to her the paragon of excellence. But she also collects them because she doesn't sell them. She just keeps them at home. At least the beautiful specimens. She does donate several of her best specimens to the British Museum, though, but she still collects them. Whereas Mary Anning is also not just a hunter. She hunts fossils, but then she sells them in order to buy food. So she's a hunter and a dealer. So nobody's just one thing. We're not just engineers or just copy editors or just firemen. We're not just musicians. We do many things simultaneously. And that's okay. Years go by, and actually two years later, Richard Anning dies, and he leaves a lot of debt to the Annings. And Mary and Joseph have to work extra hard in order to pay the bills. The mother, Molly, also starts a laundry business, but she's not good at it, and she makes no profit, at least according to Mary. Before long, something unusual happens. Remember that it is Mary who finds the rare stones, the rare fossils. But this time, Joseph does. He finds a skull, a very big skull, about 4 feet or 1.2 meters long, with very, very, very big eyeball or eye cavity. I'm not sure of the medical term. And nobody knows what this is. Everybody's perplexed, and they don't even know what to do. And they ask Elizabeth. She says that, well, we have to dig it up, but it's going to be too much for you, too heavy, because it's enormous. So she lends them money to hire the Day brothers, who are two quarrymen, very strong, Billy and Davy Day, who look exactly alike, and they do odd jobs every now and then. And throughout the novel, Mary hires them quite often whenever she finds a big fossil or big skeleton. Okay, so now we have this head that they find, that Joseph finds, but soon everybody refers to it as Mary's find because Joseph is unassertive. Remember, he doesn't want to be a hunter, he wants to be something else. And as soon as the opportunity arises, namely when they dig up, when Mary finds the remainder of the skeleton and when they dig it up and they sell it for some money for £23, which is one of those many historically accurate facts that just add up to the whole experience of the novel. So when they sell it, when they get a little bit of money, he under the advice of Elizabeth, on the advice of Elizabeth, becomes an apprentice, a future upholsterer, and he starts working for Mr. Reader. So Joseph is not like Mary. He wants a normal life. So he's fine with other people saying that it is Mary who found the creature. He doesn't care. And as I've also said, Mary does find the remainder of the creature. And at first, nobody knows about what it is because they, as I've said, people interpret the Bible literally, and nobody had seen anything with eyes like this. Elizabeth is perplexed as well, and she goes to Lord Henley, who is the proprietor, the owner of the beach where the fossil is found. And she asks him, okay, what do you think this is? Well, it's quite simple, he says. He's an obnoxious narcissist and an arrogant, shallow person. He says it's obvious. At first, God created crocodiles like this with big eyes, and then he changed them to a better model, namely the crocodiles that we have today. Elizabeth, however, is not convinced, so she goes to the church, to Reverend Jones, and asks him about it. And he says, well, all the answers to your questions can be found in the Bible. And he starts reading some excerpts of Genesis. He says that nothing changes, not even the mountains or the rivers or the lakes. Everything is exactly as God created it. Obviously, Elizabeth is not convinced, and she just ignores him and moves on with her life. And she never, ever discusses fossils with him again. Later, it is discovered that this is indeed a creature that no longer lives. It's called an ichthyosaurus, and it's named by one Charles Koenig, who works at the British Museum. Know that it's not named by Mary, it's not named by Joseph, it's named by somebody else, a male scientist. And what happens with the croc? Well, Lord Henley buys it for £23, as I've already said. And what does he do with it? Does he keep it? Does he showcase it to others? To show, say, okay, this is what I bought? No, he sells it to one Mr. Ballack, who has a museum in London, claiming that this is his find. Elizabeth finds out about it during her annual visit to London. She goes there every March and spends anywhere between 4 and 6 weeks, depending on how quickly her sister-in-law gets irritated. And Elizabeth, Louis, and Margaret, together with their nephew John, go to the Bullock Museum, and they see the specimen. And the specimen is distorted. They have even put some parts that are not original to the skeleton just to make it look a little bit more complete. And it's a parody of what it should be. Elizabeth is furious when she sees this. On going back to Lyme Regis, she confronts Lord Henley immediately and asks him about that. And what he cares about is whether they have spelled his name properly, because the plaque says Lord Henley's crocodile. She says, yes, they have spelled it properly, but why is your name there at all? What about Mary Anning? He says, well, what about her? She found the specimen. Again, Elizabeth is already ignoring Joseph's contribution. And Lord Henley says, well, she's just a working girl. What did you expect? The fossil was found on my property. It is my fossil, therefore. And that's that. I think that Tracy Chevalier has exaggerated the ridiculousness or the preposterousness of this creature. He's really obnoxious, really shallow, and quite frankly, really stupid. And such exaggerations or hyperboles are fine because she's trying to make a point here. She's trying to show how unfair life was back then and thus make us think whether we have fixed this. And I don't think we have. We still have people taking credit for somebody else's work, which is a recurrent theme in the book, by the way. So many people, including Mary, do that it's almost difficult to keep track. The main point is that the person who invents or creates or finds something is not necessarily the person who gets the recognition for it. For example, let's talk about Nobel Prize. So this is today, especially in physics and medicine. We have 1 to 3 people who get the prize, but how many actually contribute to that? I've attended several lectures given by Nobel laureates, and all of them say that they have worked in a team and so on, and some of them have even shared a slide at the end of the presentation with several hundred names of people who have contributed one way or another to the solution of the particular problem. But this is not contribution. What is having your one name among 500 others on one slide at the end of a presentation? This is nothing. And then again, what is to be done? Can you give the prize to 500 people? Is their contribution the same? No, it is not. It's not an easy topic. There is no easy solution. Just that the world is too complex for simple things to work, usually. Some problems are just too complex. And that's why I find books such as Remarkable Creatures good, because they make us think about those problems. And maybe one day, after many, many iterations, we will manage to solve them, manage to come up with something that actually works the way it's supposed to. Anyhow, years go by and Mary grows into adulthood and she starts being interested in men. Elizabeth thinks that she has out this stage of her life, but she never does outgrow it. And as you might expect, the two of them grow a little bit apart because of a man, actually because of 2 men. And I'll introduce them one by one. The first one is called William. He's my favorite character in the entire book. He's ridiculous. Or peculiar. Maybe peculiar is the best word to describe him. He teaches geology in Oxford and he's in love with rocks. He loves everything that's rock. All fossils, all special rock formations, everything. He never stops talking. He's full of ideas, one after the other. He doesn't execute them that often, though. He's more of an inception type than finisher type. And he lives for science. He's completely unperturbed or unperturbed by or uninterested in money. And he goes one summer to Lyme Regis because he has heard that Mary has found a bunch of fossils, in particular several skeletons of ichthyosauri, which have already been named. And he wants to hunt with her to find some more fossils that he can use for his lectures. And the two of them obviously need chaperones because the times are what they are and so on. But that's not important. The important thing is that both Mary and Elizabeth like him. However, there's a problem. And this problem can best be illustrated by a few quotes. This is what Mary says about him. He was in love with rocks and would fondle a pretty bit of quartz more likely than flirt with a lady. This is Elizabeth's opinion as well. She finds out a little bit later when she decides to invite him over for dinner with her and her 2 sisters, Louise and Margaret. And the pretext is that Elizabeth has some very nice fish fossils and she wants to showcase them. Mr. Buckland agrees, but doesn't go to the dinner because on the same day, he learns about a very special fossil in an adjacent town. So he just goes there. Elizabeth asks him about that. Why didn't you come? And he says, I was sure you invited me, that I was supposed to dine with you because, there was this fossil there. And this is what she says. To him, it was perfectly normal that going to see a set of unusual vertebrae would take precedence over dining with ladies. Before long, both of them realize that there's no future with Mr. Buckland, who never gets married in the novel, and nobody's surprised about it. And they move on to a character that's a little bit enigmatic. His name is Colonel Birch, or Lieutenant Colonel Birch to be exact, although he does prefer to ditch the first title because it's a lower one. He also forgets to mention that he's retired. He has long retired from the Lifeguards, the division who fought at Waterloo, because he wants to take credit for what somebody else has done. Again, this theme, this recurrent theme that people take credit for things they have not done, and they leave out those who have actually done the work and don't even thank them. This is yet another superficial and supercilious person. Although he's different in a way. He's a fossil collector, not a fossil hunter, and he wants to expand his collection. Therefore, he goes to Lyme Regis. He has already heard about Mary, and he almost takes over her because she falls in love with him immediately, and he takes advantage of that. He spends all summer with her, and she lets him find her fossils. What this means is that whenever she sees something, she guides him to that place, and then she pretends that she sees nothing, and she lets him pick up the animal remain. She does that even with a skeleton of an ichthyosaurus, the most complete specimen she ever finds in the book. And once Colonel Birch's collection is complete, he decides to simply leave Lyme Regis without paying Mary any money, even for her services, let alone for the fossils that she has found for him. And he just leaves, having kissed her and having given her a locket with his hair, thus prolonging her longing for him. When he leaves, she gets lovesick, and she keeps daydreaming about him. She can no longer find cuirass, as she keeps calling the fossils, and she and her family grow even poorer. They almost end up having to sell the furniture. Luckily, Elizabeth lends them some money, but still, this is no long-term solution because they need to find fossils in order to eat. This is the reality. They are working people. They don't have any money like the Philpots. Philpots might not be rich, but they don't have to worry about heat, about food, about clothing. And the Annings live on the verge of starvation. Elizabeth also falls in love with Birch, and she gets very, very jealous. Soon, the two of them will have a fight, but not yet. Before that, Molly, the mother of Mary, notices that something has to be done because Mary cannot find fossils, and she decides to write to Colonel Birch asking for money, at least for Mary's services, for the time that she has spent helping him find fossils. However, she doesn't know Colonel Birch's address, so she goes to the Philpots asking Elizabeth maybe to help her. Elizabeth does know his address because 1 month after leaving Lyme Regis, Colonel Birch sends her a letter to ask for fossil of a very special fish. Elizabeth ignores the letter, but still she has the address. She doesn't say how she can help Molly, but she promises to do so. Actually, Louise kicks in and she says, "Okay, why don't you leave the letter with us, and we'll make sure that it reaches Colonel Birch." And the letter does reach him, but he doesn't care. He doesn't respond. He doesn't do anything. He doesn't send money. He doesn't even send a response. Later that year, Elizabeth and Louise and Margaret go to London for their annual visit, and they go to the British Museum. And guess whom they see there? Colonel Birch in all his glory, accompanied by one Mrs. Taylor, a widow, whom he's obviously wooing. And they overhear him saying, "Okay, this specimen you see here is nothing compared to my specimens. This ichthyosaurus, it might be bigger than mine, but mine is more complete and therefore superior. And I found so many fossils. I'm very, very good at this. I know a lot." On hearing this, Elizabeth says loudly, I wonder what Mary Anning would say about that." Obviously, the colonel is startled, but he's a military man, so he doesn't lose his bearings. The two of them have a chat because Louise and Francis managed to almost kidnap Mrs. Taylor to another room so that Elizabeth and Colonel Birch can have some privacy. And Elizabeth explains the situation, that the Annings are very poor and that at the very least he should pay her some money for the time she has helped him. But the fossils are really hers. He has stolen them from her, and that he should be ashamed of himself. He, however, says that he has no money, and Elizabeth believes that that's it, that he's not going to do anything. This is the part of the book I think that Tracy Chevalier should have worked a little bit more on, though, because we have just this one conversation. Elizabeth is still midway in her journey. She's still leading with her chin, not with her eyes. She's not as assertive as she will become later on. She's not as good in persuasion as later on. And after just this one conversation, she manages to change Colonel Birch completely, because he organizes a public auction for almost his entire fossil collection, proclaiming or stating publicly that all the money will go to the Anning family. And at the end of the auction, he also verbally informs the public that almost all the fossils they have bought have been found by Mary Anning, and that she's a remarkable hunter. After one talk with Elizabeth, to have this much change, I found it implausible. And also from a rhetorical perspective, if this were to happen at the end of the book, when Elizabeth has already completed her metamorphosis, her personal development, yes, then maybe I would have looked at it with a different eye. But a little bit in the middle, a little bit after the middle, I think it required a little bit more work. But anyhow, this is just my personal opinion. So now we have some money that go into the Annings family. They can finally pay off their debts after many, many years, and they can start thinking of living a little bit away from starvation. They still have the fossil shop, and Joseph is still an apprentice upholsterer, or is about to finish his apprenticeship. And Elizabeth and Mary have a fight. Elizabeth is jealous for two reasons. One of them is quite trivial, namely that even though she has better education and is of higher social class, Mary is decidedly the better fossil hunter. There's no competition there. So she's jealous about her skills, but she's also very jealous about Colonel Birch. And this is what she says, not to Mary, but to herself. My anger for him stemmed not so much from irritation at his inability to be a hunter rather than a collector, but from indignation that he never for a moment considered me, closer to his age and of a similar class, as a lady he might court. This really says it all. They grow apart because of a man. And this remains so for several years. In the meantime, Colonel Birch sends a dog to Mary Anning as well. So he changes completely. And he also sleeps with her, but she's the one who initiates the act. It's her desire. It's her wish. It's on her birthday. And this is kind of her birthday present, the one she sends to herself. But he tells her, Mary, I cannot marry you. And she understands, she knows that. She, unlike Margaret, Elizabeth's sister, who lives in a fantasy world, the world of romantic novels, the novels of Jane Austen and other writers popular at the time, Mary knows what life is and what battles to fight. She knows her place. She's not satisfied with it. She craves recognition, especially in terms of her work, but she's realistic for the most part. Speaking of recognition, she has already found one more animal species, a Plesiosaurus, which looks like a mixture between a turtle and a snake. It's basically a turtle with an extremely long neck longer than the rest of the body combined. And again, this is named by by men, by her friend Henry de la Bache, and by uh, Reverend Conybeare, who is a friend of Mr. Buckland. These two scientists, Reverend Conybeare, Henry de la Bache, Mr. Buckland, and also one who is kind of like seen as the Einstein of rocks or of fossils back then, called Georges Cuvier, a naturalist who lives in France. Those people are different from the clergyman that Elizabeth approached a little bit earlier, namely Reverend Jones. In that, they talk about science. They're fine with interpreting the Bible figuratively, not literally. And it is mentioned several times that whenever Cuvier writes something, writes an article, he doesn't talk about God. He talks about what evidence there is and what his interpretation of that evidence is. Nothing more, nothing less. Which is seen kind of as a progressive way of writing back then. But anyhow, the first Plesiosaurus specimen is not complete, and the second one is the second one that Mary finds. And this time, she decides to write a letter to Cuvier himself, trying to sell it to him. And the letter is accompanied by a sketch drawn by her. Cuvier dismisses it immediately, probably because it's sent by a woman, stating that, or claiming that the specimen appears to be fraudulent, that appears to be a concoction, a combination of two skeletons, just joined in together, one of an ichthyosaurus and one of something else. This almost kills Mary. She lays in bed. She stops finding cures. She stops doing anything. She almost loses the desire to live because this kills her. Remember, she is the one who has found by far the most specimens in the book. She has found a bunch of ichthyosauri, and just the skull of the first one was found by her brother. All others were found 100% by her. And what has she gotten so far? Virtually nothing. Yeah, verbally, some people, especially William Buckland, praise her, but nothing is said about her in scientific articles. She's still not a member of the Geological Society. She cannot attend their meetings. She's nothing really officially. How ridiculous is that? If this were to happen nowadays, it would be she who would publish articles and interpret her finds, not somebody else. In real life, she published only one article, as I've said, but in the book, she publishes nothing. She doesn't even get to read most of the things that are written about her. Elizabeth, through William Buckland, gets some copies, and she shows some of them to Mary, but this is a very indirect process. And also the men, as she says, and about also as Elizabeth notices later on, when they need something, they're very quick to address either Mary or Elizabeth. But when the women need something, they're not very quick to respond. Again, we have this problem of recognition. Who did something and who got credit for it? See, other people get to name the specimens, they get to make money off those specimens. I forgot to mention that Ballack manages to sell the collection for £400, another historically accurate sum. See, £400 for one summer's worth of work. This is quite a bit of money. Remember that the Philpots live off 150 a year, and they don't have to work, and they have a servant. So with this, the Annings could live quite well. Could Mary have earned that amount of money? Because it was her skill that generated the collection. Well, the answer is an unequivocal no. And why? Because she's a woman. She cannot organize an auction like that. Who would go there? She doesn't have the connections. She doesn't have the respect of other people. She doesn't have anything really. Anything but sheer skill, sheer knowledge, hard-earned knowledge. And as Mr. Buckland says, even though her knowledge is not based on books, but based on experience, it's nonetheless very valuable. Certainly not less valuable than that of Cuvier or of Henry de la Bache or of anybody else. When you think about it, today we have the same problem. We have people who are extremely good at selling things, and they have become so by simply getting better and better and better and better at selling things. But the artists themselves might not get much. Take the book industry, for example. A typical author gets like how much? 8% of the book price as royalties? 8%. So 92% of the book price goes to somebody else. Yes, there's a lot involved. There's the production, there's the marketing, there's the distribution, there's this and that and that and that and that. Is 8% okay? And this is if you're lucky. Look at the visual arts. One of Leonardo's paintings, I think Salvator Mundi, was sold at an auction in 1958 for less than $100 because nobody knew that it was a Leonardo. Some decades later, in 2013, when it was proven or concluded that it was a Leonardo, it was sold for, I think, $80 million. And in the same year, it was resold for $127 million. So just based on who the artist is, one thing, the same item can cost $100, so $127 million. And in the case of Leonardo, this is clearly something very skillfully executed and something very rare, because nowadays we have only about 15 extant paintings that are partially or fully attributed to him. So we have this scarcity, and also we have the popularity, and we have the high quality. But still, the same item can cost $100, actually less, or $127 million. Isn't this ridiculous? Also, a copy of that's done maybe in the 16th century even. So I'm not talking about a modern copy. Copies of art that are done almost at the time of the production of the different paintings can cost a few thousand, as opposed to in excess of 100 million for an original Leonardo. So we have this problem today as well. We also have this with brands. So why is a brand piece of clothing more expensive than another one? Is it higher quality? Well, maybe, but maybe not, and certainly not 100 times better. So this is yet another problem that Tracy Chevalier has picked on that has not been solved nowadays. If only it might have been exacerbated by quite a bit, thanks to social media and better marketing and the fact that people have more money to spend and that they're more rich people than in the past. In the past, you were basically born poor or rich. You were either born a king or a beggar, in a way. I'm exaggerating, of course, but not by much. Nowadays, at least you can climb the social ladder, rung by rung, or you can even jump ranks. You can be the next Mark Zuckerberg or next Bill Gates and create a startup that ends up super successful, which is what so many people strive for, and so few succeed. There are quite a few themes that transcend time in the novel. Another one of them is how easy it is to miss the forest for the trees. I'll read a quote by Mary. There had been plenty of deaths in our family, Pa and all the children. I spent most of my time collecting what were dead bodies of animals, but I had not thought of my own death before. What does this mean? She has been surrounded by death all her life, and she deals with it daily, kind of like a pathologist in a way. She craves finding the remains of dead animals that no longer exist, animals that have been extinct for nobody knows how long at that time, because they don't have carbon dating yet. The carbon dating was invented about 150 years later. So they had no idea when the Ichthyosaurus and the Plesiosaurus lived. And however, in the book they acknowledge that those animals are no longer alive, unlike the proposition of some clergymen that they must be alive but live somewhere unexplored, like in some hidden parts of Africa or South America. But no, soon enough, the scientific consensus becomes that those animals no longer live. Cuvier is one of the first official proponents of this idea, but many people hint at it. Many people think about it before he publishes an article on it. This is something that can happen to anyone. When I reached this quote, I started thinking, okay, what are the things that maybe I do on a daily basis and that are just part of a big picture? And because I'm so immersed into what I'm doing, I have forgotten that big picture. It's so easy to fall into that trap, isn't it? Anyhow, I got off tangent a little bit. I've got to finish the tale about what happened with Mary's letter to Cuvier and to Elizabeth, and with what happened with Elizabeth. So Elizabeth and Mary don't speak to each other. They don't even meet. They avoid each other. And Mary sends this letter to Cuvier trying to sell him her Plesiosaurus. But he dismisses her and he calls her fraud. And this almost kills her. Molly, her mother, goes to the Philpots and says, you have to help me because Mary is very, very bad. And Elizabeth thinks, okay, maybe it's time to move on. Maybe it's time to let go of this stupid fight. Let's be friends again. Let's help Mary because she deserves to be helped. She deserves help. She deserves everything she can get. And she says, okay, I'll try to do something. Does anybody know about the letter? No, it's just the Philpots now and the Annings. So nobody's going to spill the beans. And the world is not going to find out that Cuvier thinks that Mary Anning is a fraud and thus ruin the Annings business. But you never know. This might happen. The Plesiosaurus in question is en route to London to be displayed at the meeting of the Geological Society, although it gets delayed for the meeting. But Elizabeth doesn't know that yet, and she has to talk. She has an idea. She'll go there in person to talk to the men, to try to persuade them to defend Mary and her Plesiosaurus before Cuvier. She does that. And what does she do? She goes to London by herself, by ship. And this trip changes her. This trip completes her metamorphosis. She finally becomes who she wants to be. Independent, self-confident. And she leads with her eyes. True, she still needs the help of a man. She this time it's her nephew John, who has the name of his father. The two of them go to the meeting of the Geological Society about half an hour before it begins. During this meeting, William Buckland is about to become president, and he and Reverend Conybeare are about to report on the Plesiosaurus, on the complete Plesiosaurus skeleton that Mary has found. Mary explains the situation and asks to be allowed to listen to the meeting. Buckland agrees, but she has to do so secretly. She has to hide behind. She has to hide somewhere, and he also agrees to say a few good words about Mary, albeit at the end of the meeting, and those words are to be kept outside the official meeting minutes. So nothing official, but still good praise in front of influential people who might then go to Lyme Regis and thus spread the word even further. And Reverend Conybeare, Mr. Buckland, and several other people do write reports on the Plesiosaurus, not necessarily defending Mary. Actually, they mostly don't mention her at all, except to say what she has done wrong. But they still defend her find. And later on, Cuvier acknowledges his mistake and even sends two of his people, one Charles Lieu and another Constant Prevost, to Lyme Regis to purchase something from Mary Anning, to watch her in action and to see how she does this, because by this time she has already found a ton of skeletons, Ichthyosauri and Plesiosauri. When they reach her workshop, however, it is a very special day. She has found an Ichthyosaurus, yet another one, and the Day brothers, the ones whom she hires to dig up fossils for her, have also found something. They find the skull of Plesiosaurus, but they don't know what it is and they want nothing to do with it. They just call her, say, okay, this is what we found. What is it? And she says, it's a Plesiosaurus. What? It's a turtle, because they are so illiterate that they cannot even learn the Latin name of the species. And they're afraid of it in a way. She tells them that they can dig it up, but they say, no, we don't want it. So she decides to buy it off them. She pays the money to dig it up, the entire specimen, and to transport it to her workshop. Ironically, this is the specimen that the two Frenchmen want to buy. The specimen that's not hers, and she doesn't tell them that it's not hers. She's excited that Cuvier wants some of her work, and she sells it for almost no money, for just 10 pounds to them. And then her mother approaches her. Wow, you have become a dealer like Lord Henley. Oh, Mom, stop it. Why? Well, because you sold somebody else's work and you claimed it to be your own. You didn't tell them that the Day brothers found it. You didn't ask for their name to be written on the plaque. And she says, well, my name won't be written on the plaque either. It will just say Plesiosaurus. But this is not the main point that she understands. And we have this fluidity again. So Mary gets recognition, her biggest recognition for things that she doesn't find. And she gets virtually no recognition for what she does find. This is very messed up. So remember that the skull of the first Ichthyosaurus was found by Joseph, her brother, and this Plesiosaurus that is going to go to Paris, to the museum of George Cuvier, was found by the Day brothers, not by her. And in between, she finds more than 10 other skeletons. Maybe 20 or something. What are we to make of this? What is the right thing to do? Could we ask her to be like Victor Hugo's Jean Valjean, who does the right thing just because it's the right thing? And what is the right thing here? To let go even of that? Of this tiny bit of recognition that she might get after having spent so many years in obscurity, hungry, cold, in pain? Maybe she should have mentioned this, but did she have to? I still don't have an answer to this question. It's very easy to judge others. And I think that many of us would have said, yeah, this was found by somebody else. I oversaw the process and I'm going to clean it and whatnot, and I know what it is. But still, it's not my specimen. Whereas the 20 others or so are mine. I found them, I cleaned them. And yet somebody else named them, somebody else classified them, somebody else wrote articles on them, which I'm not even allowed to read. Isn't this an outrageous, a preposterous situation? How is any of this fair? She's just a person after all. She's just a human. And she has her dreams. She wants recognition. This is her biggest desire. She wants to be recognized. She's already self-confident, maybe by age 5 or earlier. Remember that she's a lightning survivor. And in real life, she also was. It's quite a cool story. She knows that at some point she will also die. And speaking of which, we all are going to die. So every now and then we should also think about our mortality. I don't know. I don't know what the right thing to do is. in that situation. In an ideal world, this should never have happened. She should have gotten recognition for what she has found and no recognition for what she hasn't. But this is not what happens in the novel and not what happens in real life because we are not as meritocratic as we would like to be. And meritocracy is, or the desire for meritocracy is probably one of the main messages that Tracy Chevalier wants to convey to her readers, that we should judge others based on their skill and hard work, not based on their age, gender, skin color, or any other arbitrary characteristic. It is skill and hard work. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. And this brings me to my favorite quote of the entire book. If it can't happen in fiction, surely it won't happen in life. This is what Elizabeth tells Margaret when Margaret is fantasizing about a potential marriage between Colonel Birch and Mary Anning. Elizabeth says that even Jane Austen wouldn't write such a ridiculous thing in her novels. I think, however, that Tracy Chevalier means the exact opposite of what her character says. Namely, that if something can happen in fiction, it can also happen in real life. In the Battle Angels of Our Nature by Steven Pinker, the author argues that when novels became available to the public, in particular after the invention of the printing press in 1451 by Gutenberg, this resulted in a decline in violence because people learned, or people improved their empathy skills. They started suddenly putting themselves in other people's shoes. They understood that the others were the same like them, the same as them. I find this convincing. If you live in a society where you have no access to any other cultures, you are likely to become insular. You're likely to start othering everybody else and saying, "Oh, these are animals. These are not worth. These are creatures that are not worth considering." If you're brought up this way, and we can see how many wars there were fought now in the past. I'm not saying that there are no wars today. There are far too many, and now we have the means to kill everybody with nukes. And hopefully this never happens, but this is unfortunately a possibility for the first time in history. In the past, ever since 1945, it has been an actual possibility to wipe off the entire civilization. Nevertheless, I believe that more and more people realize that war is not as glorious as portrayed in the Renaissance pictures, where you have very beautiful white horse and a general riding on top of it in front of a castle or something. And everybody's pretty. No, this is not what war is. War is horrible. How do we make the world a little bit better? Maybe we should start by making it a little bit better for ourselves, by being assertive, by not letting others take advantage of us, or at least trying to do that. Because if we cannot stand up for ourselves, then who else will? They're just going to stamp us down. They're going to destroy us. They will take advantage of us in our relationships, in our work, everywhere. We have to be a little bit more like Mary Anning and like Elizabeth. Elizabeth at first doesn't have this skill, but she learns. It takes her years, but she learns. She never gives up until she reaches that point. We should also be curious and open-minded. There's so much in the world. There's so many things we don't know. We have yet to explain that we might never explain about the universe, about our own bodies, about everything, really. If you keep asking the question why, you end up inevitably with the answer, I don't know. There are many things to discover, and this is part of what makes life so interesting, isn't it? And also, when something is discovered, we should give credit where it's due. These people contributed. These people did that. Again, what if 1,000 people have contributed to one project? Then it becomes difficult. I don't have a solution for that. We have the project manager. Then again, this might not even be the most competent person on the team. Maybe that person is good only at managing, not at inventing. I don't know. It is a very, very, very difficult question to ask. At any rate, I think that this book shows us that it is worth living a life of adventure to a point. This reminds me of Charles Bukowski, who says, find what you love and let it kill you. If you find your true passion and somehow manage to turn it into your calling, into your job, then you have a fulfilling life. You might not get particularly rich, you might not get particularly successful, but it will be your thing. You will find your remarkable creatures and you'll love it.